Thank God for a new week. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Monday business here on Business Morning. 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversation. That's what we have stocked up for you. I'm Amy John McQuan. We start as usual from the global space where oil prices slipped on Monday as the U.S. did not exert more pressure on Russia to end the Ukraine war by implementing further measures to disrupt Russian oil exports after the presidents from both countries met on Friday. So we look at the numbers and we see it's green for this morning. Brent went up 0.45% to $63.08 a barrel. And then for WTI, it's also up 0.33% to $66.07 a barrel and we know that meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin that happened in Alaska on Friday emerged more aligned. The president of the U.S. emerged more aligned with Moscow on seeking a peace deal instead of ceasefire first. A lot of reactions have been following that. The U.S. president said that he did not immediately need to consider retaliatory tariffs on countries such as China for buying Russian oil. But you remember before now, India had that 50% hanging over his head and that he might have to, in 2 or 3 weeks, cooling concerns about disruption in a Russian supply. That was not the expectations, you know, after all that we were counting down towards that meeting in Alaska, but that's what we got from President Trump. There was no ceasefire. I mean, he seemed to agree more with Vladimir Putin that they should work towards ending the war totally. So that's where we are. And yet on Friday too, there was the headline, the inflation numbers for July in Nigeria that came out, and despite the latest moderation in that headline inflation and core inflation in the July number, the persistence of food and month-on-month price increases still show unresolved structural weaknesses and some form of pressures on the economy. This is according to economic think tank, the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, that's the CPPE. In a statement signed by Chief Executive Officer Dr. Muda Yusuf, the CPPE says that the latest inflation figure, which shows a fourth consecutive monthly decline, presents a mixed outlook for the economy. CPPE also notes that while notable improvements in the key indicators were recorded, there still remains some lingering risks that demand policy attention. And according to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's headline inflation dropped further from 22.22 in June to 21.88 in July, and that marks a 0.34 deceleration for the month of July. And following that, so let's try to understand the trend and implication of these numbers that we see right here on the board. That's the headline inflation. We see there dropped from 22 to 21.88. We see food inflation also, increased from 21 to 22. So there's a danger sign there. There's core inflation, 21.33 from 22. So that is a drop. And then the urban inflation went up slightly, 22.01 to 22.72, while rural inflation, we see, went up slightly. So we need to understand the message in between these numbers. We see some up and some going down, and we need to understand what that means. So now let's talk to Dr. Taufik Raimi, the President and Chief Executive Officer of REIT Value Consultants, to help us understand the message in between all of this. Dr. Raimi is joining us from our Abuja studio. Dr. Raimi, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
So on a general overview, we see a drop in headline inflation, but when you look closer, it does seem that there are some danger signs there. What do you see?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important question you have asked. When you look at the MBS latest report on inflation for July, you will see that the headline inflation year on year has come down from what it was in June. June figure was 22.22%. but in July, it dropped slightly. Year on year is 21.78. And of course, we know that the headline inflation generally is an all-in one basket inflationary measurement for the entire key sectors, which include both food component and the non-food component. So when we look at that, we will say that Nigeria economy, especially in terms of inflationary trend, is no longer in a panic mood. That is what that headline suggests, especially when, again, we also see that it has dropped consecutively for the last 4 months. So it means that we are enjoying the economy in terms of inflationary variable is enjoying some stability. Which is very good. It means that most of the reforms undertaken by the economic team of the federal government, led by the president, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, seems to be working so far. However, like it has also been highlighted, we have a slight increase in the food inflation, which again gives us some concern that there's still more work to do. This food inflation generally means that we still have to have more people going into the farms. We still have to control insecurity. We also must engage in ensuring that farmers are supported. The federal government recently launched the delivery and procurement of 2,000 tractors. There is the need. There are questions around whether these tractors have been deployed and to who and what impact it will mean. So generally, we will say that so far, the Nigeria economy, in terms of the latest report, the July 2025 headline, and other inflationary measurements, the core inflation, the urban inflation, and the rural inflation, and the food inflation, when we put everything together, it shows that Nigeria economy inflationary trend is no longer in panic mode.
But what about the urban inflation? Dr. Raimi, we see urban inflation also slightly higher between June and July. We see it's at 22.01. Oh, I beg your pardon, it's on the reverse. What does this mean, the urban inflation?
The urban inflation means that this slight increase means that there is still high cost of transportation, that the urban dwellers are possibly facing. It also indicates that there are other increases in terms of housing, which is accommodation. The cost of accommodation generally is increasing, whereas we also could see that the food also is slightly on the increase, of course, as depleted by the food inflation. So this shows that, like I said earlier, while some gains have been recorded, which must be consolidated, there is still more work to do. The other part that we need to also examine is also that the information we have read out so far has been on the national, that is the federal government outlook of inflationary trend. What about what this inflationary report says across the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT? Do you know that as regards this report, this latest report, the headline inflation has also indicated 10 states in Nigeria where the cost of living is lowest. This is led by Yobe. In that category, we have Zamfara. In fact, in terms of states in Nigeria where we have the lowest cost of living, which means that the inflation in those states have reduced, both in terms of food inflation and headline inflation. We have 8 of those 10 states being in the north, whereas we have 2 in the south. The 2 states that are in that category in the south is River State and then Ondo. which means that we need to also take a closer look at what those states that have the lowest cost of living have done. We also have states, contrarily, we also have 10 states in Nigeria where the cost of living is highest. This is led by Borno State. And the reason for that, each of these states have reasons why what we have studied and we have found may have attributed to why the cost of living is lower in their state and why the cost of living is higher in their state. So when we take an holistic view of all these, we should be able to suggest to both the government and all the other stakeholders that are involved on what more need to be done.
All right, Dr. Raimi, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I mean, just as you have said, the need to consolidate on recent gains. CPP also said the same thing, talking about the need for structural interventions, because even as you noted, inflation is highest when it comes to states, in a state like Borno, and we know insecurity is at the top of that. But thank you so much. That's much we can take on this conversation. Dr. Taufik Raimi, President and Chief Executive Officer of Reed Value Consultants. Thank you for your views. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now the Federal Inland Revenue Service is stepping up its digital transformation drive, rolling out new technology-driven platforms aimed at making tax administration faster, more transparent, and easier for taxpayers. The Chief of Staff to the Executive Chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Tayo Kole-Oshu, says that this initiative is part of efforts to expand the nation's tax net, improve compliance, and boost government revenue in a more efficient and accountable way.
Our number one focus is on large taxpayers because they are the most organized sector, and those are people doing 5 billion and above, I think. And so for those, because we feel we need to ease our way into this new digitization idea between the merchant buyers ecosystem. So, and we've looked at global plans and how other countries have done it. We believe that the large taxpayers, they have the wherewithal. It's good for their business, for them to be the start. So as we roll out these large taxpayers again, we will then be able to learn from it. A lot of questions and suggestions have actually come up in these last 2 days in terms of some operational, what happens if I issue an invoice and then the invoice is not consummated, is returned. So there are all sorts of things that will happen for our own local system. So those things we are learning now. We are going to then use all that to improve on the system. So once we are now done with the large taxpayers, we now start looking at the medium tax, and as we roll out, remember I said data picture versus is invoice picture and invoice data. So we all buy things. If I go to the market and buy a fan, I'll get an invoice, which is just an invoice that is handwritten. So by the time we go into the digital space, how do we capture all those data elements that we need to drive compliance?
Yeah, so that was part of the meeting that the FIRS had with large taxpayers. The e-invoicing is on. They said they have about 1,000 taxpayers already captured in that new system. So this morning, we'll be talking about trying to understand how that's going to work. I have right here in the studio one of those who will make it work in the system, you know, in the value chain, a service provider, in the Chief Executive Officer of Ace of Spades, Mrs. Ariola Giwa Amu, right here in the studio. Good morning, you're welcome.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
And she came with Deputy Managing Director of Courtvale Business Solutions PLC. We know them business solutions. Mr. Wale Shonaike. Mr. Shonaike, welcome and good morning.
Good morning, thank you for
All right.
having me.
Yeah, so last week was a busy one. FIRS was in Lagos. That's part of it that we showed there, talking about the e-invoicing and all of that. So let me start with you. Help us to understand your role. Let's start from there in this value chain of e-invoicing and what e-invoicing is supposed to do. I know they're starting with the large taxpayers, but they say later on they'll go to the smaller businesses. What's it supposed to do, and what's your role there?
Thank you for having me once again. We serve as service providers for the whole process. We are actually the architectural structure backbone of the e-invoicing ecosystem. We are the bridge between the FIRS merchant buyer solution and the businesses. So through us, we provide a digitalized, secure platform to transmit invoices from businesses to the merchant buyer solution of the e-invoicing platform.
So how does this work? It's supposed to be a live invoice. Help us to understand that aspect.
Yes, the invoices are transmitted online real time. So if you're sending an invoice through our application system, because we can act as tools, we act as two major processes for you. We can be your access point provider, or we can be your systems integrator. So if we are your systems integrator, we build a middleware to connect your system to the merchant buyer solution of the invoicing platform. And through our access point, your invoices go through the online real time to get validated by the invoicing platform, get paid, and it comes back to you to know that that process has been fulfilled.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Shonaike now. All of this is to build trust in the tax system, put integrity there, so that we can win more people into the tax net. How does this translate to integrity of the tax system in Nigeria?
Okay, this system coming on board is expected to improve revenue to government. That's number one. Number two, of course, it's going to make transparency to be the order of the day. And either two, you will agree with me that anything that is done manually provide rooms for manipulation, provide room for inefficiencies. But with e-invoicing and a digitalized platform, it brings in efficiency, it brings in transparency, it brings in openness. And once openness, transparency is there, then more revenue comes to government. Even businesses are done in a way that everyone is sure of what has been done, government is sure of what has been transmitted, and you can predict, you can plan, you can execute with ease all that needed to be done. So this is expected to bring efficiency, bring effectiveness, and of course improve revenue to government.
So I hear improve revenue to government, because when you say it is live e-invoicing, so that means a merchant is carrying out a transaction and it's immediately being transmitted to the FIRS, which will determine how much the merchant is going to pay as tax at the end of the day. So that will eliminate settlements, the perception, at least, even if it's not true, the perception that, taxpayers have to pay under the table so that they can reduce, that will bring that. But does that really win the confidence of more people to the tax net?
Okay, yeah, it will. Why? Because prior to now, things are done at whims and caprices of people. Then when you have a system that is digitalized, a system that is efficient, even people that are not willing to pay, they know there is no hiding place. So they just must come to the table. Because if you don't come, there's a penalty. If you come, you get incentive. If you come, you are even confident of the system you are doing. Then beyond all that, we run a government that we know must be driven by proper tax collection to improve infrastructure, healthcare, education. So if you are a business person, it is in your interest to make sure that you get the right thing done. Prior to now, anyway, if you don't, government will come after, they will come and do tax audit. What you have avoided, you will still have to pay, even though there will be room for negotiation. But in this one, yes, everybody is satisfied. You are okay, you are doing the right thing, and you are comfortable.
Okay.
To add to that, now a lot of businesses are manual. So with this mandatory need to go on the merchant buyer solution of the e-invoicing platform, you must. So small businesses that haven't been captured have decreased the Nigerian tax to GDP ratio. So we bringing all those people on board is going to definitely increase that, and it's going to definitely increase revenue, because you're talking about the layman on the street who's selling computers. Those are small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are not captured in the tax net. But this will definitely capture it, and it will also give FIRS, soon to be Nigerian Revenue Service, visibility into businesses. There will be no need for manual audits, because now all digitalized invoices are stored. You can pull them up with Q codes and all that. So it will help the taxpayer also avoid having those long manual audits where you have to bring all documents and papers and all. Now you're passing everything through the e-invoicing platform, and there's more visibility and transparency.
Now, for you as a service provider, I mean, we know service provision in Nigeria. We know the issue of infrastructural gap in Nigeria. I mean, what's the assurance there'll be no downtime, there'll be no errors, you know, one would not be in the middle of transaction and then network? Do you understand? These are fears and concerns.
Absolutely. What we are doing as service providers is to make sure that we use the right people.
There are 19 of you, I believe.
16.
Oh, 16 of you
but
approved
more,
by
hopefully
FIRS.
will come on board, and I hope more women, not just me. So going forward with that, as service providers, we must make sure we have the right capacity to do these things. We must be recommended and certified by NIDA, the Nigerian Information Technology Data Agency. So they must make sure that we meet all the right we meet all the prerequisites to become a service provider. And once you go through that, and it's not easy, you have to be certified by several different things before FIRS will now say, yes, you're ready to go on board. So with downtime, we definitely have a way, once the system comes back on board, it automatically transmits the invoices to get them certified by FIRS.
Well, one of the advantages of what you have asked is that companies were not just picked off the streets. They went through screening, and they were picked based on criteria that they have met, and of course, track records. Most of the companies that are picked are people that are already playing in the tech area, people that have done businesses over the last 10, 20 years in technology, some already in existence with FIRS in terms of data information and exchange and verification. So the track record is there, and so it gives assurance that these are tested institutions that can deliver on the mandate.
So it's not man, no man.
It's not man, no man. It's not man, no man.
But you know, I'm still thinking in my head that this is solving the problem on the one side. So it's solving on the problem of increasing revenue, ensuring that taxpayers actually pay the tax. But are you guys also talking to FIRS, even though it's not solely their responsibility, on the usage of the revenue? For instance, subsidy was stopped. We see states getting more allocation. And people are asking, so subsidy was stopped, people are paying more for petrol, then where is the buffer? Where is the, you know, the consequence or the positive gains we're supposed to get? So the same thing here. While we are struggling to get more revenue for the government, do you have conversations with them? Since you companies are the ones that...
Okay.
Do you have conversations with them about, you know, how to also ensure that these funds are being used judiciously so that I'll be happy to pay tax next year?
Okay. The question is, okay, it's good. It's the right of every Nigerian to ask government, how are you using the resources that you have collected on behalf of the Nigerian people? To what efficiency have you converted these resources? Yes, not within our mandate to ask. Even FIRS as a government institution, is not within FIRS mandate to ask government, how are you using the mandate of FIRS, collect revenue maximally to government. Government as an institution has its organs. The National Assembly is there, the judiciary is there, the NGOs are there, the civil rights society is there. These are organs that can checkmate government in terms of efficiency, what they do, how are they doing it, and query some of these things. But we believe if you deliver on your mandate, more revenue comes to government. Government will have no choice than to, number one, deliver on its promise. And secondly, if you know you are accountable to the people, you also must try as much as possible to be as efficient and effective, knowing fully well that the public will ask questions.
And I'm glad you are part of the people, because eventually you will still have to pay taxes and still provide power for yourself. Obviously. You will pay taxes and still provide roads for the road leading to your factory.
I think it's in our interest for government to be efficient, for government to use resources very well. If I pay so much for power services, when government is efficient and there is efficient power system, I'll save a lot of money. The same way for other infrastructures that government is expected to provide, our institutions should be the best, our educational institutions should be confident enough that I don't need to send my kids abroad. The schools in Nigeria are okay. I'll save resources, and quite a number. So these are conversations that is not, of course, to the public. We are all Nigerians.
Exactly. I know it is not the FIRS, yes. And I know it's not in their mandate. Yes, but I mean,
what you're trying to say, which is what is most important, is that we, the people, must hold government accountable, because we're paying this money and we're not seeing the infrastructure development. We're not seeing what is benefiting to us. Instead, we're seeing people who are not supposed to be the beneficiaries of these monies spending it for themselves, taking their children abroad, doing all that. So Nigerians as individuals must hold government accountable through, like he said, the National Assembly. And even then, maybe even hold the National Assembly accountable too. So it's a holistic thing. No.
Welcome back. It's still Business Morning right here on Channels Television, and we're having a conversation about the circular economy. Doesn't sound very popular, yeah, but we'll get to the root of it today. Now, let's look at Nigeria's circular economy, at some of the high points of it. There you have it. We see currently, Nigeria's current market size of the waste recycling sector is approximately $40 billion. Can you beat that? $40 billion. The market size is set to hit $100 billion by 2030. That's the same year we want to hit our $1 trillion economy, yeah? Then experts estimate the creation of about 250,000 jobs. Waste generation, more than 32 million tons of solid waste annually. Composes food waste about 43%, plastic 15%, paper 7%, and generate about 1.1 million tons of plastic waste annually. Other materials like textiles, wood, and glass make up the rest. Less than 20% of the waste generated is collected through the formal system. And we know right here in Lagos, there's been attempts to help sort waste right. I don't know how far that has gone. And less than 10% of the total waste is recycled. So let's talk about this now with the Special Advisor to the Lagos State Governor on Climate Change and Circular Economy, Mrs. Titilayo Oshodi. Mrs. Oshodi, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good
I
morning.
guess we're going to make this a Lagos conversation. I don't have a choice now.
Well, we're in Lagos.
I know, right?
Rightfully so.
Yeah, but I mean, there's really no waste. At least that's what they say now. Everything can be recycled, but we have to work on our orientation. And we know that Lagos State has attempted to, starting with sorting waste. I think that's where it starts from, but correct me.
Yes.
Sort out the waste, and then we now find out what's being used, where it's being... But
yes.
How far have we gone with dealing with our orientation on dealing with waste and then sorting it as the beginning, foundation of all of this?
First and foremost, I think that it's best for us to set the background, and that is that the fact that our future is very, very dependent on sustainability right now. And then our mindset also, we're beginning to look at a conservative estimate of a 1.3 metric tons of waste. That is conservative on a daily in Lagos State. And this is an enormous, it presents an enormous economic opportunity within the value chain of plastics that can be recycled, textiles that can be upcycled, metals that can be remanufactured, even cooking oil that can be repurposed, for aviation. So you will see that over that period, our organic waste is one of the biggest that we can channel into biogas and compost. Yeah, composting. And so, we already see this playing out in Lagos. Because you have said, even in your intro, that circular economy seems to be not so popular. We need to make it popular. We need to make it tangible. People have to be able to relate to it, because in some ways we've already started to practice circular economy, but we just are not quite accepting, or we're not quite knowledgeable about it. And that's why one of the projects that we have productivized in Lagos is called the EcoCirculate initiative, and it's essentially an initiative that intercepts recoverable waste from wastelands, from the waterways and communities, and channeling them into recycling and reusable products within the industry. We had one event, EcoCirculate activation. We call it activations. We have dimensioned it and modeled it in different ways. We work with faith-based institutions, we work with business networks, we work with communities, to sort of simulate and role play the possibilities of how a value can be placed on the waste that you typically generate in your home. When we went to Ayobo about a month ago, within a space of 6 to 8 hours, we were able to recover over 1.6 tons of waste, cutting across plastic and textile. Textile, being the highest of it. And each of these waste streams have its own market value. They have its own market potentials. Today, plastic sells at 300, minimum 300 naira per kg. Textile is coming up as well. Aviation oil is what is it's called SAV, Sustainable Aviation Oil. It's a cooking oil that is also being used and being repurposed for that. So what it means is that, there are viable economic opportunities, but from the source, we need to start to drive that literacy, that advocacy, so that the homes, the household begin to see that these are tradable items. They're not waste anymore. They're not to be discarded anymore.
So I know that you use Lagos State, that is, you had this program where you incentivize it so people can sell their waste and all of that. But how far has that gone?
That is, that is the program. That is the vehicle that is making it relatable and tangible for the people. So another thing that we, essentially want to do right now is, because we're already positioning our young businesses who are collectors, in that space, they get to interface directly with the community members, with the household members, so that they can not only engender or, they can propagate the operations of their businesses, but they can also expand, in terms of bringing in more potentials, people who want to run the business, and they can have them positioned in different communities.
But is Lagos making enough noise about it? I live in Lagos, and I thought by now that perhaps in my area I would have had someone to come, and then we have something sorting, or some kind of noise about, oh, you can actually sell your waste. I mean, when you say small businesses are dealing with that, perhaps you need to get more businesses to be involved in it so that they are more widespread, because I haven't seen one in my area, that's the truth.
Well, first and foremost, if I mention the areas that we have been to, it's usually the very densely populated agrarian, coastal or riverine areas.
Priority.
No, it's a priority, because we feel that they generate a lot of waste. You don't have the PSPs or the collectors or the regulators in those areas as such. So they're the ones. If you find out, Loma always have these platforms where they show the indiscriminate disposal of waste. You will find that it is usually in those areas where you do not have so many of those trucks that are able to engage with them. So if we're able to prioritize them, and get them to be more useful or more functional with the waste, with their waste disposal, then we can begin to look at those areas that are more middle class oriented or more knowledgeable about what they can do, with their waste, and we can begin to drive that economic development. Because what we're doing essentially is that we're opening up their eyes to the economic propensity that can be generated, in those areas. But also, to answer your question, you know, there's just so much that government can do. We need the hand of the private sector. The Office of Climate Change and Circular Economy have simulated over 6 different projects like that, from, you know, Trade Fair to Badagry to Lekki, Shombotedo, you know, to Ayobo. We're going to Ojokoro. These are budgets that need, you know, to be propagated. We need to be able to proliferate it. And this is where we need the hands of the private sector, because collection hubs have to be established in those areas. Once you incentivize people and they understand that their waste can be exchanged for value, one person will tell the other person. You know, that's why you haven't heard it, because by the time they come into your community and they say, oh, your housemaid or your menial workers are saying, madam, you know, please, when you pack your plastic, just help me put it aside. There is one place where they take and go, you know, and we can get something in return. What will get out? You know, and this is where, you know, the handshake between the public sector and the private sector becomes very, very functional and, you know, instrumental for us.
So you're obviously asking for more private sector participation.
Absolutely. It's important that we get, you know, that handshake. We need to get more investment, you know, from the private sector.
I hope you're making it easy for private sector to come on board.
There are pillars. The Lagos State is working, you know, with 3 pillars. You know, we're trying to drive technology and innovation because we want to essentially digitize, you know, the monitoring, the tracking, and the reporting, you know, of waste disposal. We want to be able to, you know, entrench, you know, that climate-friendly behavior. But at the same time, we also want to be able to work with private sector, you know, from investment in commerce and also in, you know, climate finance. The EPR, the Extended Producer's Responsibility, is one of the areas that the private sector also have a mandate to be able to establish their reporting. And these are the ways that we can work hand in hand together to be able to push the budget that can help to establish those innovative technical collection hubs that can help our people to understand that waste is no more intangible. It's no more a waste, but it is a resource, and it can be defined in so many ways.
And what's your target? Maybe end of the year, next year? Do you have a target you're working?
If we had looked at, you know, the Ayobo activation, for instance, having to collect 1.6 tons, you know, of waste within 8 hours. If we look at the cost of carbon that we have captured, that could have landed in the landfills or landed, you know, in the waterways, and you numerize it, you know, into Naira and Kobo. If we fragment, if we, you know, aggregate that across various communities, you know, what we recorded at Ayobo, you know, even on our plastic waste alone, was going to almost 300,000, you know, Naira, and in a day. And this is not limited to plastics alone. We had textiles, you know, we had carton. Carton also has very, very high prolific, you know, calorific content. So it becomes a catalyst, you know, if we're able to simulate and replicate all of this across the various local governments, you know, within the state. And there are private sector organizations, there are, you know, multinationals that have their factories, they have their, you know, workshops, you know, scattered across Lagos as well. So this is essentially a call that this is a new, you know, dimension to sustainable living. It's a new dimension to economic development. It's a new dimension to social, corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility right now becomes a benchmark for reporting and verifying ESG contributions.
And there are incentives too. That makes it good.
Absolutely. But, so everybody wins.
Yeah, you know, the one I'm really looking forward to, I know the landfill, you know, the one around 7 Up was...
Yes, the Olushosu.
We're looking forward to having electricity from there. That was in the plan. I saw the master plan, except I saw the wrong one. But I mean, it seems that talk is dying off.
No, it's not dying off. They've finalized all of the agreements, the MOU on it. The Loma has already said that they're going to shut down that place, which means that there will not be so much of waste going in there, except for organic waste, The idea is that after, all of the paperwork and everything, all of the equipment and all of the processes, the chemical processes for the conversion and everything begins to work. So yes, it's still in play, and the government is definitely going to roll out.
Do you have a timeline?
I'm not in a place to talk much about that.
Okay, all right.
We'll have the MD Loma to come and tell you specifics on that.
Okay, all right. I mean, we're still looking forward to it. The need for electricity and the essence of it for industrialization can never be overemphasized. You're welcome back. It's still Business Morning here on Channels Television. Let's take a trip to the world with Laddie Williams. Laddie?
Thank you so much, Annie. Yes, on this trip, at this point, it's all about what to expect this week and what's going to drive
before you go on,
in
you
the market.
can't escape the Alaska meeting. Were you disappointed?
So many reactions. Some people saw it differently. Some said...
How did you see it?
I just felt Trump was just a little different.
Laddie, do you think that there's something special going on between President Trump and President Putin? Because
I feel
once President Trump meets President Putin, we see another side of him.
Yeah, because
even in negotiations.
Nobody talked about Putin's dressing, even though he did wear a suit. Unlike the previous one, but I guess, And
now the pressure goes back to President Zelensky. I think they are meeting today.
They're meeting today.
Yeah, to talk about, how to compromise and give out some of their parts of their country for peace to reign. I mean, I didn't see this coming.
It's looking quite tough, at this point, because we know Zelensky's stance at this point. He's not willing to let go of any
no normal person who wants
Nobody would agree to that. But we're just hoping for the best, and markets are definitely going to be looking out for what happens, with those
meetings today.
Yeah, but also we're just see central bankers meet. It's a pivotal moment for, global finance as central bankers, top economists, policymakers, they're gathering for the long-anticipated Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium in Wyoming. That's from August 21st to 23rd. The annual retreat tackling this year's theme is labor markets in transition, demographics, productivity, and macroeconomic policy. It will serve as a stage for Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's keynote address, expected to signal the Fed's next moves in a fraught economic landscape. Also, this week, markets will be closely watching as two major economies, as the UK and Canada, they're going to release their CPI data. That's for July. For Canada, the inflation data is slated for release tomorrow, with economists expecting a modest uptick from 1.9% to around 2.0%, reflecting firmer energy prices and base effect dynamics. Then also, MPC decision, it marks a pivotal moment for global monetary policy. Two major central bankers are moving in different directions in Beijing. The People's Bank of China, PBOC, they continue to chart a cautious path, holding rates steady and reaffirming a moderately loose policy stance despite signs of economic softness, including falling investment and credit contraction. Meanwhile, New Zealand, all eyes are fixed on the Reserve Bank of New Zealand ahead of its scheduled rate decision. That's coming on Wednesday, August 20th. A near unanimous Reuters poll and shadow board forecasts about 25 basis point cut to the official cash rate, lowering it to 3% as inflation cools and labor market pressures. That's growing at this point. But let's look at what's happening today. Thailand's economic growth that slowed in the second quarter of 2025, with GDP rising 2.8% year-on-year, down from 3.2% in the previous quarter. The Q2 figure came in slightly above the consensus estimate of 2.5%, but below the previous quarter's growth rate in quarter-on-quarter terms. Growth eased to 0.6% from 0.7% in the first quarter. Exports remained the main economic driver, expanding by 12.2% year-on-year, marginally lower than the 12.3% recorded in the first quarter. Then to the digital asset, we see Bitcoin, that's below $116,000. Today, reversing sharply from last week's record highs as fading expectations for aggressive Federal Reserve easing and heightened geopolitical risks that weighed on investor risk appetite. The world's largest cryptocurrency last traded 2% lower at about $115,664. Then we see Tesla, they're offering discounts of up to 40% to car leasing firms in the UK to shore up sliding sales. That's according to the Times, as Elon Musk, the electric vehicle maker, grappling with a rapidly shrinking market share across the globe. And that takes us to the UK now. Let's get expectations on the data front. We have Juliana Olayinka, our London Bureau Chief, now joining us. Great to have you on the show. Happy New Week.
Happy New Week, Ladu.
All right, let's start with data expectations. It seems the CPI data coming this week is quite important because we've seen inflation that's been rising in recent months in the UK. How are you seeing it?
It has been rising. I think it's quite a busy economic data outlook for the week. And as you know, I just heard you and Nini talking about the volatile global backdrop that all of this data is going to be tied to, and that is the coalition of the willing, those European leaders who are on their way to Washington for all important crunch talks. This is not just geopolitics. This has got so much to do with the global economy and how we are going to be functioning with our energy over the next coming months. So the backdrop is all pegged to that. But on Wednesday, quite rightly, as you said, we are getting July's inflation data. Now, headline CPI is expected to rise to about 3.8%, which is still above the Bank of England's target rate of 2%. Of course, we know they've been doing so much work to try and get that inflation down, but we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. On Thursday, attention is going to shift to public finances, and we've got borrowing data coming in, and it's forecast to be just above £2 billion. This is part of the headache that Chancellor Rachel Reeves has got as she is kind of drafting her August statement. And then Friday, we're going to be looking at consumer strength because we've got retail figures coming out, and that's a bellwether really for how the British High Street is operating under interesting times where the cost of living is still battering. But as I said, what happens in America from 5 p.m. local time onwards is definitely going to shape some of this data that's going to be coming this week, Laddie.
Well, I guess we can expect some, volatility there. But there's also some chatter over the weekend in the UK about possibility of a wealth tax in the UK. And Juliana, I know you're a very wealthy lady. What are the reactions to these talks?
It's quite interesting. It's a fierce debate. It's always been a fierce debate about wealth tax. And even those who are not so wealthy always feel slightly put off by even the suggestion of it. But, it's back in the spotlight because we know that there's this fiscal hole that since Labour has been in power in Britain, which has been just over a year now, we are not seeing those economic benefits and the uplift in society that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, had forecast. So they are looking for money. And even last week, Gordon Brown, her predecessor, her pre-predecessor, weighed in on perhaps lifting gambling tax, hiking gambling tax. Now wealth tax has been put into the mix. And basically what this means is that ultra high net worth individuals with assets above £10 million, more likely you, not me, Laddie, they would basically be asked to provide generous amounts of tax to the coffers on pensions and property, and apparently this could save the Treasury about £80 billion a year. But again, we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. It's being mulled. Usually they put this in the press to gauge public reaction, and they take a stance from there.
All right, I guess let's see if the rich will have to pay more, going forward right there in the UK. But we see Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium. That's hot this week. How are UK investors bracing for comment, coming from the symposium?
It's quite interesting. As you were saying at the top there, historically, Jackson Hole is the venue to signal major shifts in monetary policy. This is obviously going to be led by Jerome Powell, but things, we're not in a normal universe. We're in Trump's universe, right? So Jackson Hole is now secondary to what is going to be taking place in the Oval Office today with European leaders. It appears as if monetary policy is going to be determined from there, because we know that Jerome Powell also has a very fractured relationship with the President of the United States. But, you know, his keynote is going to be very interesting when it's delivered on Friday. Is it going to be a note of resignation too? We're not sure. But I think really, Laddie, all markets are focused on the Oval Office and what is going to come from those talks. I don't know if you've seen that Trump's already put out some statements about Zelensky on Truth Social before he's even got there. So it's box office again, Laddie.
All right, we'll definitely be watching out for what comes out from there. Thank you so much, Juliana, for giving us the details.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there you have it. It's box office. According to Juliana there, I'm sure you have your popcorn ready to watch all that's going to play out this week.
You know, one thing Juliana said is we're living in a Trump world.
Yes, a Trump world.
Yeah. One day we'll be free.
Maybe.
All right, Laddie, thank you. Well, just before we go, last week was not a very positive one for Nigeria's stock market. The market lost 0.77%, and we lost the 146,000 level, went down to 144,000. Market cap closed around 91 trillion naira. Insurance stocks that become the darling of the market saw a lot of profit taking. They say that's normal. We wonder how long that will take. But that's it. On the program, the Business Morning at 1:30, Laddie will be back here to give you update from the world of business, especially the market, and other conversations are with you. I'm John Mekwa. Enjoy the rest of your day.